Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today it's finally time for the Lost Ark review, thoughts, impressions, whatever the hell that you want to call it. I promised this video a long time ago, but I wanted to give the game time. Lost Ark is a game that I've been waiting about 7, maybe 8 years for at this point, and with it finally coming out in the West, I was obviously over the moon. Sure, I've played it before in the betas in the other regions of the game, but I never fully invested in those regions because I was holding out hope that there will be an eventual Western release. And I'm glad that I did, because now I got to experience the game with a lot of it still feeling fresh to me. But it's because of this long-awaited release that I wanted to make sure that I gave the game enough time to go past this honeymoon phase and for me to also get to the point where I can see what your day-to-day gameplay would be like. The game released with Tier 3. For those that are unfamiliar with the terms, Tier 1 is essentially the base game, Tier 2 is the first expansion, and Tier 3 would be the second expansion. So while we're only at the start of the Tier 3 content, it's a wealth of content that is available for us on launch. So I wanted to chew through most of it till I got to the point where I can kind of get into the rhythm of what the day-to-day experience of Lost Ark would be like. So for those that are interested in what my account progression is like, then I'll just quickly go over that. My main is currently sitting at 14-15. I could push her higher, but I'm saving up materials to push Destroyer as far as I can when that releases in about 2 weeks from now if plans don't change. But 14-15 is all that I need for the next raid that will be releasing, so that's why I'm holding off on getting her item level up further for now. I could technically try to go for 1445 so that I can do hard mode of that new raid, but I know that my friends who I raid with won't be ready for that in time, so that's why I'm not too bothered about getting my main there just yet. For alts, I have 6 more characters in tier 3, one at 1370, which is the item level that you need for the Argos raid, or phase 1 at least for that, as well as the hard mode Abyssal dungeons, 4 more at 1340, which is where you can do the second Guardian raid, as well as both normal mode Abyssal dungeons, and then I have one last one that is sitting at 1310. Doesn't have much gear yet, but I'm also not planning on gearing him just yet, for the same reason I'm not gearing any of my other characters at the moment. I want to push Destroyer as far as I can on release. And I still have a few more alts in tier 2 as well. So I've been busy. In terms of content, I've dabbled a little bit in just about everything. I've cleared most of the battle content in terms of Guardian raids, Abyssal dungeons, and as well as the Argos raid. I've cleared all of that. And I've also slowly been working on my collectibles, because that's also a part of the endgame in Lost Ark. Completing your adventure tome, getting island souls, masterpieces, Mokoko seeds, all of those things will contribute to strengthening your account, but more on that later. So as you can see, I've invested a fair amount of time into playing the game, not just the vertical gear progression, but also some of the horizontal account progression. So that's kind of like the background of where I stand with the game right now. So now that you know that, let's then get into the different elements of the game. Let's just start at the beginning with character creation and class selection. The character creation is very Korean MMO-like, I guess would be the best way to say it, with each class having its own specific archetype in terms of look and feel. Each warrior is going to be a buff male, martial artists are Asian-looking females, and mages are elven females, etc. They are working on making gender-bender classes, but they are still unique compared to their counterpart. So far we have 2 of them. Striker is the male version of War Dancer, and Gunslinger is the female version of Deadeye. But even though they share a lot of similarities behind the gameplay style and the skills that they have available to them, they're also still very unique because they have different class engravings and also different skills. So it's not like in an MMO, like Final Fantasy XIV for example, where you create one character and they can become every class. In Lost Ark you choose a main class, which has a predetermined character model, and then you get to customize the face of that character. Hairstyle, skin color, that kind of stuff, but you can't change the body type or gender. I know a lot of people won't be fans of this, but I'm kinda used to it from playing other games like Closers Online or Black Desert, so this isn't anything new for me. What you can customize, however, you can customize in a lot of detail, so I'll give them props there. I sadly can't show the character creation because I maxed out my character slots and I don't want to delete any, so I'll just show some screenshots of a few of my characters. In terms of the outfits or costumes, there is no glamour or transmog system. The only cosmetics that you can equip are actual cosmetic items. So if you come across a nice looking chest piece while leveling, you won't be able to use that as an outfit later on. But again, just like with character creation, if an outfit can be dyed, you can go into a lot of detail. Being able to change the color to literally anything on the RGB scale, being able to change the gloss of the fabric, and even adding patterns to certain parts of the outfit. So again, you need a cosmetic item to be able to do this, but if you have one, you can make it look very unique compared to someone else that is wearing the exact same outfit. So after creating a character, you then get to pick your advanced class. So for example, say you choose a warrior as your main class, then the warrior class has 4 advanced classes, which would be Gunlance, Destroyer, Berserker, and Paladin. And after creating your character, you get to test each of these subclasses in a little test area, and then you have to pick and choose over there which one that you want before getting started with the story. The test area is kind of limited compared to the one that you get access to later in the game, but it will give you an idea of how the class will play. So it's at least something compared to just having a short trailer video that they will show you during character creation. Let's then move on to the story. On the surface, Lost Ark's story is very mediocre. Has some good moments, but overall nothing too special. You are the chosen one that has to find all of the fragments of the Lost Ark to stop the demons from invading Arcasia, which is your world. Nothing we haven't seen before. I did, however, enjoy the way that the story was told. So finding the Ark is your end goal. However, to get there, you then journey across different continents of Arcasia, and each continent has their own story and their own characters. So they're essentially different chapters in the story, or different books in a series would probably be a better way to look at it. The main story experience also changes a bit, going from the leveling experience to the end game, because while leveling you just zoom through like 5 or 6 continents, I think it is, so it's a lot of story that you have to absorb at once, and I felt like it would become a bit of a drag towards the end. But that could also be me. I personally don't like spending hours upon hours going through a story. I much prefer it in short bursts, which is probably why I prefer the way the endgame story is told a lot more. So while leveling, you just have this non-stop story progression until you reach level 50. At that point, you'll get a quest that tells you to reach a certain item level before you can continue, and this is where the endgame story starts, I guess. The experience is still the same, where your journey for the Ark continues and you go from continent to continent, but now you're forced to take a break from the story whenever you finish one continent's storyline. And as I mentioned before, I prefer my story in short bursts, and now the story is forcing that upon you. So you do some endgame to gear up, you then get access to a new continent, spend about 2 to 3 hours going through the story there, depending on your pace and if you're watching cutscenes and whatnot, and then you again have to spend a few days going through the endgame before you can move on to the next continent, and then it just follows that same pattern. However, main story and side quests that you come across aren't the only story that is in the game. There are around 90 islands, I believe, each with their own storyline, and some of these are really good. Not only that, but there are also hidden stories and character stories that you can unlock by romancing NPCs. So there's a lot of depth to the story of this game, and when you go looking for it, there is a lot more to it than is shoved in your face. I guess you could kind of compare this to Destiny 2. While the game story has been getting a lot better recently, it used to be fairly mediocre, but if you went looking into all of the lore books, then you would realize how much more there really was to the world. And with Lost Ark it's kind of the same. What is being shoved in your face is alright, but if you take the time to explore, do the island quest, complete reports with the NPCs, find the hidden stories, then you'll see that there is so much more to the world than what is mandatory to progress to the story. Of course, it won't be for everyone, but if you're somebody that can appreciate story in games, then there is a lot to be had in this one. So that does it for the story, but what does the endgame have to offer? Because as I mentioned before, you will have to interact with the endgame content to progress through the story as well once you reach level 50. So you have dailies, weeklies, and one-time content. Dailies are things like Guardian Raids, Chaos Dungeons, and Una tasks. Those are kind of your big 3 that you'll want to do each day to progress your character as fast as possible. There's also the Procyon Compass that has different activities on a mostly daily basis, but these are all time-limited event-like content, like a world boss or adventure island, just to give some examples. There's also PvP, if you're into that. I personally am more of a PvE kind of guy, but the PvP in this game is fairly fun. It's also not influenced by your PvE progression, which is something that I love. So I think you unlock PvP around level 26, somewhere around there, and if you jump in as a level 26 characters, you will have the same strength as someone who is level 50 with maxed out gear. Everyone gets the same stat points and skill points to spend before entering a match. There are a few different game modes, but the ones that are played most are the 3v3 one and 1v1 tag team. 3v3 is also the mode for the ranked playlist, which makes sense because I do feel like the PvP is designed around 3v3 combat. While PvP might not have daily entries like your PvE content, there are benefits to doing it. There's a weekly quest that will reward you with some PvE materials, and by just PvPing you will also earn PvP tokens that can be traded at a vendor for PvE materials. So if you're someone that likes to PvP, then you can still progress on the PvE side of the game by PvPing, and I think that's a pretty good thing. So let's then get back to the PvE side of things. Guardians are essentially monster hunter fights. You and your party get dropped into an area in which there is a guardian, and then you have to go find it and kill it. Each guardian has their own sets of mechanics. Some will be very simple, just as long as you don't get hit you'll be fine, but others have actual mechanics that you need to do correctly, or you or maybe even your whole party might die. They also again took some inspiration from Monster Hunter, with some bosses having parts that can be broken, and when you then break those body parts, they will become unable to use certain dangerous attacks. And also once you slay the Guardian, you also need to quote-unquote carve your rewards. It was very clear that the devs were Monster Hunter fans, but the gameplay is quite enjoyable. There are certainly a few fights in the game that had me chugging potions all the time because I constantly kept getting hit by things, but after some practice it feels very satisfying being able to dance around the mechanics while pumping out damage at the same time. Chaos dungeons are just a big mob grinder. Waves of enemies are being thrown at you and you just kill them until you reach enough progress to move on to the next stage. In stage 2, elite monsters will also be added to the mix with a final mini-boss that you need to kill before you can move on, and then in stage 3 you have a mix of waves of enemies, and then once you kill enough you can destroy a red boss stone to summon a mini-boss. During the second stage, you can also get entry tickets for Cube and Boss Rush from that final mini-boss, and before moving on to stage 3 there's also a chance that you get a gold or a boss portal. A gold portal will just give you some golden materials, and a boss portal will have you fight another boss that also drops a bunch of extra loot. So there's some RNG to the rewards, but that just makes it even more exciting when you do get an entry ticket or another portal to spawn. Finally, we have Una tasks. These are repeatable quests that you will want to do either for extra materials or for reputation rewards. For example, I have my main character set up to get gear related materials, while I have some of my alts set up to get silver, because that's one of the big currencies in the game, and then some of my other characters are set up to get reputation rewards. Now, when I say set up, that refers to the Bifrost being set up for my Una tasks. Teleporting around in this game is quite limited, but the Bifrost is the one thing that can circumvent this system. A Bifrost will let you teleport from anywhere on the map to your Bifrost location. So if you take the time to set up your teleport spots, you can very quickly Bifrost to all of the locations and be done in a matter of minutes, instead of having to manually go around to each place, which could take quite a while. I guess I could just insert the traveling aspect in here real quick as well then before I move on. So you can't teleport between continents unless you use a Bifrost, but again, each Bifrost teleport you have to manually set up, and it has a very long cooldown once you use it. So if you want to go from one continent to another, you first have to teleport to the harbor, hop onto the ocean liner boat, which can take a minute or a little bit longer even than that to depart. Then you arrive at your destination, and then you need to teleport again to the place on the map that you want to go to. Alternatively, you could sail instead of taking the ocean liner, but all of this takes a very long time, and it's one of the things that I kinda dislike about the game. Sure, it adds some realism into the game, but I would have much preferred it if we could just teleport around. As you get further into the endgame, this aspect isn't too bad, as you won't be going between continents as much as when you're just starting out. And when you do need to sail to an island, for example, you'll probably have upgraded your boat a bit and gotten some good sailors for them, which speeds up your sailing speed a lot. So then this is a lot more bearable. But in the beginning of the game, this was a major pain point for me. Nowadays, I only go out to sea for the adventure island, and then when I do my Una tasks, I already have my Bifrost points set up for those, so it does get a lot better, but in the beginning it is quite bad. But let's go back to what I was talking about. So, Guardians, Chaos Dungeons and Una tasks are your daily activities, and then for weeklies we have Abyssal Dungeons and Abyss Raids. Later on we'll also have Legion Raids added to that, but for now this is what we have. Abyssal Dungeons are a 4-player activity, with the exception of the Gate of Paradise Dungeons, those are 8-player, and the Abyss Raids and future Legion Raids will mostly be 8-player activities, again with one exception, which is going to be a 4-player one. These are encounters where you have to deal with actual mechanics a little bit more. As I mentioned, some Guardians do have mechanics that you need to play around, but usually failing them doesn't result in death. In here, failing mechanics can not lead to only your death, but also a full team wipe. So while mechanics are a little bit more prevalent, I don't think they are that difficult. After a few tries, you should be fine as long as you're playing with a competent group. I do know that later on we will get hard mode and hell mode Legion raids, but I can't give my opinion on that content yet as I've never experienced it myself. For now, I don't think that any content that is currently in the game is all that difficult, but I am looking forward to being challenged by what is yet to come with those hard and hell mode raids. And then once I do get to experience them, I will most likely make an updated video on those, giving my thoughts on them. As for our limited and one-time content, I would describe Cube and Boss Rush as limited content, as you can only do those when you have an entry ticket. So depending on your RNG, you will get to do them often or rarely at all. Cube will throw you in a room with modifiers, good or bad, and then has you either kill enemies or survive for a certain amount of time. Once you clear a room, you get to move on to the next one, and then it's just rinse and repeat until you have gained enough points to obtain the maximum reward. Boss Rush is exactly what it sounds like. You're put into an arena and you fight waves of bosses. The first 5 waves have only 1 boss, the next 5 have 2, and the last 5 have 3. Beat all of the waves to again get the maximum rewards. You can do this content as soon as you obtain a ticket for it, but if you don't feel like doing it immediately, you can also save up your tickets and then maybe do a few clears in a row once some of your friends are around, for example. Roster quests are another form of one-time content. While you might not have one character that can play each job, like you can in Final Fantasy XIV, you do have a roster and you share a lot of stuff across your roster. So when you unlock bonus skill points, stats, or complete roster quests, they are completed and obtained for all of your characters. So for example, when I make a new character, it will start out with about 80 skill points or so instead of 0, just because I have already done all these roster-wide quests. Collectibles would also fall under this category, and they are once again roster-wide. Completing your adventure tome, collecting those Mokoko seeds, etc. Those are all things that will strengthen your account by providing stat potions, skill points, and other resources that will come in handy in the long run. Lost Ark is a marathon and not a sprint, and item level isn't the only thing that matters in this game, and that is probably why I enjoy it so much. The gear grind in Final Fantasy XIV has become a bit boring to me. Just raid once a week at a chance for loot, and then in 2 months you're best in slot, and then a few months later when a new raid comes out, it's just going to be repeating that process. There's nothing really else to do to make yourself stronger. In Lost Ark, almost everything that you do in the game gives you some sense of progression, and it's not just a gear grind like you have in Final Fantasy XIV. There's a lot of horizontal progression, which is something that I do feel like is lacking in 14, and it's something that you don't need to do all the time either, because it's a one-time thing, and it will help not only your main character, but all of your characters, so your entire account. So whenever you don't feel like playing alts for a day, or when you just want to chill for a bit, then maybe work on your collectibles and flesh out your account a bit more. So I guess I could kind of touch on alts here as well then, as it is also a big part of Lost Ark. Do you need alts? Not at all, but they are a very nice thing to have for multiple reasons. Each character has their own entry count into most content in the game, so even if I've done my dailies and weeklies on my main, I can still do them again on my alt and progress multiple characters at the same time. Again, something that I find a bit unfortunate about Final Fantasy XIV. I only get to play my one class and then I gotta wait till next week's reset. Although I suppose I could make a new character, but that's just more effort than it's worth. In Lost Ark you get to progress all of your alts every day if that is something that you want to do. If playing multiple characters is too time consuming for you, then you don't have to worry, because there are systems in place to make it less time consuming as well. You can send out a boat from your house to do a set of dailies for you. So if you don't feel like playing a character for a bit, but you still want to get materials, then that is one way to go about it. Another way is by using the rest bonus. Each time that you don't do a daily activity, you accumulate rest, and when you then do that activity while the rest bonus is active, you gain double the rewards. So while you do lose some materials in the progress, it is a very good system to make use of when playing alts, as it cuts down the time that you have to invest in them considerably. So outside of just giving you more game time, alts are also a good way to take care of reputation Una tasks and boosting your main. As I said before, Una tasks are time consuming if you can't set up Bifrost for them, but you can assign alts to certain tasks and then have them idle in that area where the Una task is, or just set up Bifrost slots for your alts once you unlock them, so it makes that aspect of the Unas a lot better. Another reason is feeding materials to your main. As I said in the beginning of the video, I am currently preparing materials for Destroyer, and that is because a lot of materials can be traded across your roster. So right now, I have essentially got 7 characters that are doing dailies and weekly activities, but a lot of their materials are going to be saved up and funneled into my Destroyer once that one releases. You can't trade everything, but you can trade a lot. So if you want to get through the gearing process faster, then having alts to help you out is a good way to go about it. But honestly, alts are also just a way to keep the game fun. I'm someone that enjoys variety, and if I were to do the same content on the same class every day and week, then things would just become stale eventually. And playing a different class has me approach content in a different way each time that I get to do it on a new character. So it keeps things fun. I guess I should also briefly touch upon the roles that you can play in this game, because Lost Ark isn't your traditional MMO with the holy trinity of tank, healer and DPS. Instead, we have DPS and support is not a healer, by the way. So for DPS, this is just the same as in any other MMO. Your main focus is to deal as much damage as you can. Most classes will play around some buff or debuff, and then you try to fit in their highest damage skills within that buff window. But there's also a few that are more of a sustained DPS class. For supports, however, things are a little bit different. Your DPS output is very low compared to that of a DPS class, but instead you bring a lot of buffs and debuffs to the party. Your debuff is referred to as a marking, and when you mark a boss, they will take increased damage. Your buffs then have a variety of effects: a damage boost, defensive mitigation, shielding, maybe even some healing, mana regeneration. There's a lot to go around, so having a support in your party is always a nice thing to have, because they make the runs more comfy. You get all these defensive buffs, so you don't need to use a potion as often because you're taking less damage, and you'll maybe get some healing from time to time as well. And it's not like your runs will be slower either, because the buffs a support provide will cancel out their low DPS. In fact, having a 3 DPS 1 support team composition will actually deal more damage than a 4 DPS team composition, so there's no reason to not take one. In terms of the gameplay, things are also a bit different, because instead of focusing on dealing damage or playing around a small damage window, you're more focused on keeping up your marking applied to the boss and providing buffs to your team, and when the mark is applied and your team is buffed, then you can mix in some DPS as well. Not to say that you won't be doing damage while supporting either, because almost all of your skills will have a damage aspect to them as well. So for example, for Bard, your mark is a DPS spell that just has a marking property to it, and your buffing skills also deal damage to the boss while you're buffing your team. So it's a little bit more positional based, I guess. You want to try and hit your team with your skills to buff them, while also hitting the boss at the same time to deal some damage. And while I know that your damage might be lower than that of a normal DPS, any damage that you deal is going to contribute to the boss dying faster. So that does it for our 2 roles that we have. Let's then get into the gearing and the character building. So doing dailies and weeklies, and also certain one-time content like island quests and such, will provide you with different upgrade materials. There are a lot of different currencies in the game, but once you interact with them for a little bit, everything is very straightforward. To upgrade a piece of equipment, you first need to give it some sort of an experience material, and once you've done that, it's ready to upgrade, and then you need to use some other upgrade resources to then level it up. As you get higher into the item levels, your gear will eventually not have a 100% upgrade chance anymore. At first, it will slowly go down from like 100% to 90 to 80, 70, etc. But in tier 3, it does drop really fast. Now, having RNG upgrades can feel bad, but there is a bad luck protection built into the game in the form of artisan energy. Each time that you fail, you will build up artisan energy, and this will do two things for you. So first off, it will give you a tiny increase in your success chance. Might not be much, but it is something. Secondly, once your artisan energy reaches 100%, your upgrade chance will also become 100%. So eventually you will succeed your upgrades. It's just a matter of time. There's also no gear de-leveling or breaking while upgrading like some other games like Closers and Black Desert, so while it does kinda suck to have RNG upgrades, you will get your upgrades eventually, and your gear will also stay with you for a very long time. It's not like in Final Fantasy XIV that whenever a new raid comes out, your old gear becomes useless. You will keep upgrading your existing gear, and even when you switch from one gear set to another, you still get to carry over your upgrade levels, so your effort is never wasted. And well, this is talking about tier 3 gearing specifically. Going from tier 1 into tier 2 and then into tier 3 is a full gear reset, but tier 3 will last for a very long time to come. Even for the Korean server, it's still going to last a while. So your gear is going to stay with you for a very long time. So let's then talk about character building. Getting higher item level on your gear only gives you more stats like HP, defense, damage, etc. But you can change the way your character plays and feels by using the other character building options. So the first thing to consider are your skills. You can select up to 8 skills out of a wide selection. Some classes can use more than 8 skills, but those are referred to as transformer classes. So for example, Gunslinger has 8 skills for her pistols, but then 4 for her shotgun stance and another 4 for her sniper stance. And there's a few others like that, but even those classes still have to make some choices. Those skills that you then choose can be leveled up, and at levels 4, 7 and 10 you get access to tripods. These will change the way your skills work. Some are very straightforward, like a damage bonus against bosses, shorter cooldown, bonus gauge generation, etc. But some will actually alter the way your skills function, going from a casted skill to an instant version, making a normal skill a combo skill. There's a lot of options to choose from, so that is one way to change your playstyle. Another is by equipping engravings. Class engravings are the ones that will have the biggest impact on how your class will play out, or which playstyle that you will want to go towards. But even some normal engravings can have a very big effect on the feeling of certain skill types. Engravings like All Out Attack and Supercharge are a good example of that, as they not only increase the damage of certain skill types, but they also speed up the casting/charge time of those skills. So if you're, for example, building around charge skills, you might want to pick up Supercharge as one of your secondary engravings. But back to class engravings. So each class has access to 2 class engravings, and I'll take my Sorceress as an example here. Sorceress has Igniter and Reflux as their engraving choices. Igniter focuses around the Arcane Rupture buff, wherein Reflux completely disables this buff and will instead add passive damage and cooldown reduction to your skills. So this makes Ignite a very burst-focused build that is also very immobile, because you'll want to use your identity gauge on Arcane Rupture. If you use it on Blink, you're reducing the gauge, and that will of course also make you lose damage, because you'll have to wait longer before you can use your Arcane Rupture again. So that's losing damage. Reflux is then the sustained damage build, because you don't have access to Arcane Rupture, but you also don't lose damage by using Blink, as it's the only thing you now get to use your gauge on, so you're a lot more mobile. Ignite also focuses more on casted spells, as the burst window shortens their cast time considerably, but for Reflux you have more options. You can still take the casted skills if you want to do so, but because you don't get the benefit of reduced cast times anymore, you can also take a different tripod option that will have them be instant cast instead, or maybe take a different skill altogether. So that's the first choice when building a character. The second would be your stats. Igniter benefits from specialization, as specialization will boost the Ignite damage buff that you get, and it will also increase the rate in which you generate your identity gauge. So it's a win-win. More gauge means faster burst windows, and more specialization makes that burst window stronger as well. But because you don't really care that much about your identity gauge on Reflux, you don't need to go specialization. You can go crit instead, and that allows you then to take critical damage related tripods on your skills to further increase your damage, because you're going to be critting more often, so might as well increase the crit damage of those skills. In tiers 2, you also get access to gems. These will either increase the damage of your skill that the gem is for, or give cooldown reduction to that skill. So depending on what you want, you pick damage or cooldown reduction, or both, but you're limited in the amount of gems that you can equip. And in tier 3 you are able to level up your tripods. So that cooldown tripod that gave you 10% CDR, you might be able to level that up to give 20% CDR instead. And the same thing goes for damage or gauge generating related ones. So you can really min-max a certain build or playstyle once you reach further into the endgame. And while we don't have this yet, but once the first Legion raid Valtan comes out, we will also get access to relic gear, which again adds another layer on top of your character building. So if there is a class that you really want to play because you like the look of it, but you're not sure about their skills, then do give it a try, because you might just be able to build your character in such a way that it fits your playstyle by picking the right skills, using the right tripods, and then all of the other stuff that I just talked about. You can really make a character suit your playstyle. Is there a best build for each class? Sure there is, but switching out a skill here or there or using a different tripod isn't going to make a huge difference. And besides, if that alternative skill or tripod choice will make you perform better on that class, then that is going to make you contribute more to your party than if you're trying to use a meta build but you're bad at playing it. So experiment, discover what works best for you and build around that. Let's then also talk about the guild system, and then we'll call it a day. So the guild system is okay in my opinion. Guilds are character bound, so if you have 10 alts, then you will also be taking up 10 slots in your guild. So while that is a bit of a problem in the early days, now that my guild has been leveled up a few times, we also have more character slots available, so it's not really an issue anymore. In fact, it's actually a bit of a good thing that guild stuff is character bound and not roster bound because of the guild quests. So each week the guild leader or the deputies can choose from a list of guild quests. These can be gathering, sailing or battle related. They pick and choose, and then you as the guild member can pick up these quests, and when you complete them you earn guild currency as well as contribution. Contribution is something that will be set up by the guild leader, and if you have enough contribution at weekly reset you get a bonus reward. In my guild, I think it's possible to get the max contribution that you need by just logging in every day, but you can up that number to make it so that people are more incentivized to do guild quests. But we're fairly casual, so we don't really care about that too much. So a guild quest could, for example, be complete 5, 10, 12 waves of boss rush, or get a gold box reward in cube, or get X amount of kills in PvP. But it could also be go gather 80 plants or something like that. And this is where having guilds be character bound is really nice. The gathering. In Lost Ark you can craft and gather, like in most other MMOs. Crafting is as simple as get the materials, press craft, wait a few minutes for your craft to be done, but in terms of gathering there is a limit to how much you can gather each day. There's this stamina system in place, and it is shared across all of your characters, so this is why it is good for your guild. I can, for example, pick up the guild quest to go fishing on my main, then I go fish 50 fishes and I'm done. I get my contribution and I get my guild currency. So now I've done my fishing for the week, but the next day I can just accept that same quest again, but on an alt this time. Again, I get my fishes, which I can use to craft useful items, but I also still get my guild currency, because now I'm able to do that quest a second time because I'm doing it on a different character, and I can keep rotating through my alts like that. I want to do my gathering regardless, because it allows me to craft potions and also items that are needed for the gear honing in the later part of the endgame. And at the same time, I'm also getting my guild currency, which I can spend on upgrade materials in the guild shop, and most of these upgrade materials can be shared across your characters, so it's a win-win. There's a lot of other aspects to Lost Ark that if I were to try and cram them all into this one video, then we'd be here for a little while longer, but I think I covered what I think are the most important aspects of the game. Is the game perfect? Definitely not. I think there are a lot of areas that they could try to improve on, but I do think that the game is great, and I think I'll be playing this one for a long time to come. I guess one last thing I could touch on is the pay to win, because that is something that people do like to ask about. So is the game pay to win? Technically yes, because you can use real money to buy costumes in the shop, and you can sell those costumes for gold on the market, you can use that gold to buy upgrade items from other players, and you can then use those upgrade items to progress your gear faster. However, do you need to do that? Absolutely not. A free-to-play player will always catch up with the pay-to-win players, and if you keep up with the game, then you also won't need to wait to be ready for when the next content release comes out. Argos was released too soon, and that made the game feel very pay-to-win, but after that mistake, the publishers decided to check where the majority of the community was at in terms of gear, and because of that, they have decided to release Valtan in 2 weeks, if nothing changes to the release schedule at least. I've personally been ready for Valtan since about a week ago, and I'm sure that most of my friends that I play with will also be ready for the raid once it comes out. And none of the people that I play with, myself included, have wailed for materials. So while it is something that you can do, there is no need to do it if you want to just keep up with content releases. And even then, if you don't care about doing new content the moment it comes out, then just play the game at your own pace. It's still a game that is meant to be fun, and Lost Ark has plenty of content that is fun, and it doesn't just start in tier 3 either. As soon as you hit level 50, which you can do in about 12 to 20 hours, depending on if you rush the story or not, you can already start enjoying the endgame content that the game has to offer. And the further that you get into the endgame, the more content you will get access to. But as soon as you level 50, you can start doing Guardian raids and Abyssal dungeons, which is exactly the same content that I am doing in tier 3. I'm just doing different Guardian raids and different Abyssal dungeons. So enjoy the game the way that you want to enjoy it. And with that, I think I've said about everything that I wanted to say. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my patrons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.